How y'all doing this morning? It is great to see you. It's great to be connecting with everybody who's watching online. It is great to be with our middle school crew, rocking it here at the front. You guys have a great week at CIY? Yeah. Man, we prayed for you guys like crazy all week long, and we're just thrilled to hear that God was moving in some big ways in your lives. We got a kids camp and high school camp kicking off this week, so be praying again for that. We're going to be in Revelation again today, chapter 2, if you have your Bibles or Bible app. While you guys are turning there, if you've ever built anything new, whether a new house or new addition on your house or something like that, one of the parts of the whole journey, in fact, it's part of the journey that's required before you take occupancy, before you live in it and start to utilize it, is the inspection process. And whenever you're building, it's kind of like this part of the process that looms over you a little bit, and you're a little bit like, oh gosh, I hope it goes well, because the inspector has the ability to come in and say, nope, this isn't good enough, you've got to change it. Or this isn't done right, you're going to have to tear it down and redo it. They can, and they do, and you have to kind of follow that. So when you know the inspector's coming, you kind of cross your fingers, say a prayer, and you hope for the best. If they say you got to adjust, you got to adjust. When they're done, and when you've passed and everything is good, it's like a breath of fresh air. You exhale. It's awesome. So I don't have extensive knowledge with this or experience with this, but I've had enough where it is a little bit kind of nerve-wracking to go through the process. It is something that you're excited when it's done and when you're over with it. But one thing that's interesting is what they care about, what they don't care about. So like when Jamie and I built a pole barn garage, we talked about what colors are going to be, what sizes are going to be, what are the finishes going to be, how many windows are going to have. And you know what? When that inspector came to look at that, he could care less about any of it. He didn't care what color it was. He didn't care how tall it was. He didn't care how many windows it had. It was all about structure and foundations and the viability of the building as a whole, the guts. Was it built right? That was his focus. Come back for the electrical stuff. Same thing. It was about, is the infrastructure, foundation, and structure right? After that, you can do anything you want to it. But man, we had to get that before we could move forward and take ownership or take possession of the space. I think that metaphor is a great metaphor for the book of Revelation, specifically for the 7 churches that it's written to. Because it's basically Jesus, who is the builder and the inspector of his church, saying, listen, I'm going to come in and I'm going to examine. And I've got intimate knowledge of your church. I know you. I know you. I know what's going on. I know your situation. And I'm going to call out what needs to be called out. I'm going to commend what is done right. I'm the inspector. What I say goes. You got to respond to it. And similarly, like a building inspector, he doesn't care about some of the fits and finishes about these churches. Like not one time, I just want to draw a little bit, not one time does he say, I love your music. I like the colors you painted the walls. Your church graphics are great. You know what? You've got a fantastic brand as a church. None of that. There's all kinds of grace and latitude, but he wants to know, what is the foundations? What is the structure? What is really the guts of this thing? And is it built right? Church we're going to look at today, the second on the list, is the church in Smyrna. What's notable about this church is it gets no correction. No correction. No correction at all. Only one other church in this list of 7 is in the same boat. Almost all of them, there's correction and sometimes severe or extreme correction. This one, it is all good news. I'm not saying it's a perfect church, but they get nothing but good notes from Jesus. Now before we dive into what Jesus said to that church, let me talk a little bit about the city, because the city of Smyrna and some of the details around it will make the words that Jesus says to the church make a lot more sense. Big city, bustling city, seaport, kind of place that was a desirable town community to live in. Not quite as big as Ephesus, but absolutely a hub of wealth, of intellect, of athletics. Olympic Games were held here. They had a big coliseum, held 20,000 people. You could go fit in. Not quite as big as Ephesus again, but still very, very sizable. It was a beautiful city. In fact, ancient coins that archaeology has uncovered have seen that written on the coin is the phrase, the gem of Asia, the gem of Asia. And so part of what the city is like, it's centered around this giant mound. They called it Mount Pegasus. It's right in the middle of town, 500 feet tall. And in the middle of that 500-foot structure, that mound, is a bunch of buildings and such. There's a road that goes all the way around it. It looked like a crown. It was actually referred to as the crown city of Asia. Early science and medicine and some of the great thinkers of the age originate in Smyrna. Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, wrote it in Smyrna 800 years before Jesus. It was a bustling place. It was a great place. It was a beautiful place to live. But for the Christians that were there, life was very, very hard. It was very, very dark. And part of that was because the culture outside the church had demonized the people of the faith. They made up some things based on misunderstandings and really just evil that were not true about the Christians. Like one of the things they said is Christians are cannibals. So the reason we abhor them, the reason why we don't like them, they're cannibals. Where did they get that from? Well, they got that from the fact that Jesus once said, if you eat, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. In John chapter 6. What was he referring to? He was referring to a practice that he would later set up called communion, where we eat a little piece of bread, take a little cup of juice, representing his broken body, shed blood on the cross. But when you say they're cannibals, well, that sounds disgusting, and people would go, those crazy people, those crazy Christians. Or they would call them atheists. Now, this might be interesting to you, because when we think atheist, we think people who don't believe in God. But there in Rome, they worshiped their emperor as God, their president as God. And so, because the Christians said, no, he may be our leader, but he's not God, they said they're atheists. They don't believe like we believe. The early Christians would often greet each other with a kiss on both cheeks. It was like a handshake of sorts. And they said, no, gross immorality is a part of these gatherings. They said politically they're disloyal because they don't worship the king or the emperor. They said they're destroying the family unit because many of these Christians who became Christians, they had to basically abandon the faith and the background that they grew up in. And parents hated that. It was for a lot of people either choose Jesus or choose family. And when people did choose Jesus, it came at the cost for many of them as family. So all that set up these early Smyrnan Christians in a very, very difficult life situation. Very hard to live there. And it was compounded by the fact that all the people who employed anybody in town all got together and said, these guys are terrible. Nobody employ any of them. They colluded to make sure these guys couldn't find jobs. So all the Christians that lived in this town were extremely poor. Couldn't get work. Couldn't find work because no one would hire them because of their faith. They lived in poverty and struggled to make ends meet. So Revelation 2, verse 8, here's the letter that Jesus writes to that church. To the angel of the church in Smyrna, write, these are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they're Jews, but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you're about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death. Jesus in this letter gives 3 affirmations to this church that are really, really important. I think for this church who's struggling, suffering, facing extreme persecution, these 3 affirmations would be like fresh wind for them. I think these same affirmations could be applied to any situation of any struggle for any believer at any place in time. And that's why I think it's valuable for us to lean into these. In the midst of great suffering, Jesus gives the church this message that would give them hope. As they struggled to hold on to faith, he says to them and to anyone who finds himself in the face of seemingly insurmountable difficulties, these same three things. Number one, he says to them, listen, I see you. I see you. I need you to know that as you find yourself in this hardship, I see you. I'm aware. I am watching this. I know. See, sometimes when we go through difficulties and hardships, one of the first reactions we have is to assume God must not be paying attention. He must not be watching. He must not care. He must not be aware of what's going on. And Jesus says to this church, first and foremost, I see you. I see. I know you. I know the poverty you're facing. I see your great distress. He says, I see your affliction. Some translations will translate this word tribulation. I see your tribulation. It's the Greek word that means a stress or a pressure, a great stress that's pressuring you. That's a great picture of hardship in life, isn't it? When you go through something very, very difficult, it feels like there's a great weight or like a great pressure on you. For these Christians, the great pressure was, it's hard to live in this town and be a follower of Jesus. Everything is set up against us. And we are facing not only economic ruin, but we are facing physical persecution. We are getting beat up. We are getting put in prison. We feel as if our lives are in jeopardy. And Jesus says, listen, I need you to know this. I see you. And what you're experiencing is not necessarily a result of me not being there. I see you. I see you. His message to them is consistent with what we see told of other Christians in other difficult scenarios. Like 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12, Paul says that everyone who wants to live a godly life in Jesus will be persecuted. So this isn't just like a reality that someone 2,000 years ago had to face. This is something that every believer at any point in history, that if you align your life fully, completely, and totally with Jesus, you will find it coming into friction with the culture that is around you. And there will be persecutions that are there. Now, Jesus said it to his own disciples in the upper room before he went to the cross. He said, listen, the world will hate you because it hates me. So don't be surprised when the world hates you, because it hated me first. Why did the world hate Jesus? Because he confronted the world. He confronted the world. His presence and his message confronted sin, and they hated him. And so it makes sense that if they hate him, anyone who bears his image will be hated as well. He wanted them to see, I see you. I am aware. I know what's going on in your life. I know the poverty that you're facing. But not only do I see you, he says, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. He says, these are the words of the first and the last. The first and the last. The beginning and the end. Sometimes you'll hear it said, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Here's the deal. I think that when we go through hardship, we think sometimes that God is only the beginning and the end, and forget that that means he's also here in the middle. It's like we look backward and we know in history, we can read the Bible and we go, God, once upon a time, you did some great things. I can look backwards and know you were the beginning. And Revelation is in part teaching us to look ahead and giving us promise with what's going to come in the future. And I know not only were you at the beginning, you'll be there at the end, and your promises are worth trusting. But what Jesus is communicating to that church is, I'm not just the beginning and the end. I'm here with you right now. So if you are waiting on something to change, you are waiting with me. If you are suffering in a moment, you are suffering with me. If you are frustrated in a moment, you are frustrated with me. I am with you. You guys remember the first words or the last words that Jesus said before he ascended into heaven after his resurrection? The last words? Matthew chapter 28, verse 20. He said, surely I am with you always. Always. Maybe you find yourself today in what feels like an insurmountable struggle. You need to take that word always and just preach that sermon to yourself. Every time you feel defeated, every time you feel like there's no hope, every time you don't think you could take another step, you just preach that sermon to yourself always. He said he would be with me always. He wasn't just here in the past. He won't just be there in the future. He's with me right now. And it's in that struggle when you start to look for God that a strength that you didn't know you could experience starts to become a reality. You know, when we moved to Danville, I got to confess, I grew up in the Midwest, but I'm not a farm kid. I'm not. From Iowa, but my dad worked at a hydroelectric plant on the Mississippi River. You know, I lived on a city block, rode my bike everywhere that I went, to go. I didn't grow up a farm kid, but I married a farm girl. And so for 20 plus years, I've been immersed in this farm life, and it's never been more prominent than when we moved here to Danville in 2015. One of the first things we did, we actually moved in with my in-laws and lived down in their basement. All 5 of us just lived down there for a few months while we were trying to figure out our house, permanent house situation. And it was a summer, and my father-in-law was still farming at the time. He was planting, and harvest is still a long way out. But I got to be there, not just for a short little visit, but for an extended period of time at the farm. And I'm telling you, I gained a new appreciation for farmers. Because one of the things I started thinking about and caring about was stuff that I never thought about or cared about before. Like I started having thoughts like, we needed this rain. It's been a long time. I started getting anxiety that I never drove past cornfields or bean fields and had anxiety before. I would have anxiety looking out. And it wasn't because it was my fields, it was because they were his, and I'm with him now. Like I'm on it now with him. Like and he's just like cool as a cucumber all the time. And we went through a stretch, and I don't know how exactly long it was, 10 days maybe, without any rain. It's summer, it's hot, there's no rain. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, hey, are you getting worried? Like, are you like, and he's going, no, not really. And I'm like, okay, well, I am. So could you help me? Help me know. If you worry, I'll worry. If you're not worrying, I'm going to try not to worry. How do I know when not to worry? It hasn't rained in a long time. And he said this, I'll never forget it. He said, you know what? A little bit of struggle is a good thing. He goes, yeah, rain, be sure, be good. But he goes, because it hasn't, those roots of that corn, they are just pushing deeper and deeper and deeper, looking for moisture. And if that moisture was readily found and it was easy and life was just like smooth and on a consistent schedule, they'd never have to do that. And while it might look like they're a better crop, in fact, they're not. A little struggle is going to make this crop stronger than it would have been without. That's part of what Jesus is trying to tell this church is like, I know this is hard. And I know to you, this looks like more than a little bit of struggle. But I'm telling you, I'm right here with you. And as you struggle, your roots are going deeper. You are getting stronger. He's trying to help them say, I see you're in poverty. I know you are. But I'm the treasure. I'm the treasure. If you've ever done any time like in a third world country, specifically with the church in the third world country, you will see the reality of joy in the midst of hardship and very, very dire financial circumstances like you've never seen it before. You'll be around people who have less than you could ever imagine living with, and they have quadruple the joy that you have. Like you will walk away. You think you're going to help them, and they will help you. You'll walk back and come back to America and go, man, They have so much less and they have so much more joy. Why? Because they've figured out, because of their great dependency on God, He's all they ever really needed. He's actually that which their soul has longed for. He's the security that they're trying to find. And Jesus is telling the church in the midst of this great persecution, don't think for a second, I don't see you. I am with you. I'm walking alongside you. Life can go sideways. But when it goes sideways, know that the one who sees you walks with you. Emotional and physical suffering can be experienced and yet can also still be steadied by the one who's with you in the struggle. This word from this letter to this church would have been such a fresh wind. Maybe they felt like giving up. Maybe they felt like quitting. But they were being reminded, I am totally aware of what's going on. I'm proud of you. I'm with you. Keep going. Keep holding on to the faith. Don't quit. Because here's the third affirmation he gives them. Because I will reward you. I will reward you. He tells the church to hold on to the faith because it'll be worth it in the end. It'll be worth it in the end. He even uses this language in verse 10. He says, be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you life as victor's crown. This again is the reference to the nickname of the city, called the Crown City. The crown of Mount Pegasus was these roads that looped around the top of the mount and the ornamental gardens that were connected to them. As you stood down at the base of it and looked up, it looked like the mountain had been crowned. He says, I will give those who persevere to the end the crown of life. The crown of life. It will be your gift. Now listen, we don't typically wake up every morning thinking about that this may be a day where my faith is going to be tested in light of the threat of death. That's what this letter is written to people who actually that's what's going on. We do have, however, the ability to wake up every day making and walking out a commitment to stay faithful unto our death, so that no matter what we find ourselves in, whatever moment we may find ourselves in, that we would be committed to walking out faith, no matter what, in any and every situation, knowing that there could be a day where the stakes are even more ultimate. 65 years after the book of Revelation was written, a guy by the name of Polycarp, who was the bishop of the church of Smyrna, this very church that we just read about, was threatened to renounce Christ or die. He was 86 years old. He was a prominent leader in that church at Smyrna. In fact, one of the reasons why he was so prominent was because he was likely the last guy alive who had a personal connection to the Apostle John, who wrote Revelation. Their lives would have overlapped and intersected by about 20 years. Some of the influence and teaching of John was passed to Polycarp. Polycarp was a leader, he was a teacher, and he was under persecution. 65 years later, Rome had continued for decades this attempt to eradicate all Christians, no matter where they were. And though Polycarp had been in an undisclosed location for a period of time, after catching and torturing one of his associates, his location was given up. Soldiers were sent, came to his house, and instead of fleeing, he said, may God's will be done. He was led into the stadium. I told you they had a stadium that would hold 20,000. He was led into the middle of the stadium. And I think because of his age, 86, he was given one more time, one more chance to change his mind. So publicly, in front of all these people, the proconsul said, swear and I will let you go. Renounce Christ. And Polycarp turned to the proconsul. His words are part of church history. He says this in response: 86 years I've served him, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king? who saved me. The proconsul said, swear by Caesar. He says, I have wild beasts. I can turn them loose on you and they will devour you. And he said, call them. Call them. For how can I repent from what is better to what is worse? He said, I'll put you on a fire and burn you. To which Polycarp said, you threaten me with a fire that burns an hour and is soon quenched. But you're ignorant of the fire of coming judgment and eternal punishment stored up for the ungodly. Why do you delay? Do what you want. They led him to the area where this wood was stacked up to start a fire. And they were going to tie him to it to try to keep him there while the flames were burning. He says, you don't need to do that. The same God who will steady me in this moment will hold me right here through its entirety. The fire was lit. The flames shoot up. And again, this is all part of church history. The eyewitnesses who were there said it was like the wind of a sail had surrounded him. And though this flame was going up, he was not being consumed or touched by it. Baffled, the Romans sent an executioner in with a spear to finally take his life. And his own blood put out the fire. See, one little detail about Smyrna that I didn't share earlier. Smyrna got its name from the myrrh tree. In fact, Smyrna means myrrh. It's a Greek word for myrrh, which is a sap-like substance that was secreted from these trees that grew in the area. And it was extracted from that tree bark. It was used to make fragrant perfumes and anointing oils. The only interesting thing about it is the way you got this sap out of this tree was to just cut it repeatedly, to cut the bark repeatedly and then apply pressure to the bark. And as you cut it and applied pressure, this sap would ooze out. And it would eventually dry and harden in these little lumps. You know what they called them? They called them myrrh tears. And then those tears would be scraped off or harvested off the bark of the tree. And then they would be distilled. And as they were distilled, they would be reduced and all the impurities and everything would be cleared out of them. And what would be left would be this extremely fragrant oil. The thing about it was, the harder you cut it and the more you compressed it and the more pressure that you put on this, the sweeter and more pungent the odor. These guys would have known this because this is their city. This is what they're known for. This is their heritage. This is their life. Jesus was given myrrh as a baby. Did you remember that? When the wise men came, they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That's a strange gift to give a child because myrrh was used as a burial ointment in the first century. You didn't have embalming fluid. To cover the stench of a decaying body, they would cover the body with myrrh. The ladies who went to the tomb on that first Easter morning, they went to the tomb with myrrh. But what they found in the midst of their devastation was this overwhelming transformation had taken place. And what they thought had crushed them, what they thought was broken, what they thought was over, and it was done, was actually the inverse of that. They found the tomb empty. They found Jesus alive. And what Jesus is saying to this church in Smyrna is that their sufferings would anoint them for a Christ-like death that would result in a resurrected life. That though their afflictions are bitter, that they would result in releasing to the world the perfume of heaven. That's what the first century Christians learned. That's what second century and Polycarp learned. And each time the church was pressured and attempted to be crushed, what happened instead was the church put its roots down deeper. Christians put their roots down deeper, and the aroma of Christ spread and permeated more. 5 chapters later, John is looking up into heaven, And he has this picture of what's going on up there. And he sees this. He says, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every tribe, every nation, people, and language, standing before the throne and before their Lamb. They were wearing white robes. They were holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures. They fell down on their faces before the throne and they worshiped God, saying, "Amen. Praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength be to our God forever and ever. Amen." And then one of the elders asked me, "These in the white robes, who are they and where did they come from?" And I answered, "Sir, you know." And he said, "They are they who've come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in his temple. He who sits on the throne will shelter them in his presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." This was a picture of the reward of all those who endured to the very end, who kept that faith and held on and trusted with Jesus, even unto death. The reward of eternity. Friends, I don't know what you may find yourself in, and it may not be what this first century church found themselves in. But hardship and difficulty, suffering and despair are a deeply embedded part of the human experience because of sin and the brokenness that it has created in our world. What I want to invite you to do to bring this letter into life today is to make a few commitments. Number one being this: will I commit to look to Jesus in hardship? Instead of looking elsewhere, instead of another coping mechanism or a substance or something that's not actually helping at all, something that's inanimate, that doesn't see me, that doesn't walk with me, that doesn't know me, will I commit in hardship to look to my Creator and my Savior? Will I look to find how He is with me? And will I do that instead of compromising faith for the sake of comfort? As pressure is getting applied to me to be a follower of Jesus, the easy thing is to capitulate and just say, "Okay, I won't say that. Okay, I won't do that. Okay, I won't follow anymore." Will I not sacrifice my faith for that? For the sake of comfort, will I instead hold on to the end, waiting for that reward, championing with the champion of that reward out in front of me, knowing that He is ready to place that crown around me? His victory is my victory because He sees me in the struggle, because He's with me in the struggle, because He's promised to reward me on the other side of the struggle. That's enough for me to be faithful today. That's enough. So church, in light of all that Jesus has done in the past, has promised to do in the future, in the moment that you have right now, will you be two things? Will you be fearless? Will you be fearless? Will you be fearless in the face of adversity and struggle, knowing that God is with you, sees you, and is working in you right now to redeem the moment? Along with that, will you commit to be faithful? Ahead of the pain, ahead of the crisis moment, will you commit to be faithful no matter what? Trusting that God will walk through every hardship with you. Will you commit to make your treasure, your true treasure in life, Jesus and him alone. If you've never done that, if that's something that you've never personally taken a step towards, as we sing this next song here in a minute, I invite you to respond. I'll be standing over at the exit to your left. Love to meet with you and pray with you and help you take that step. Help you connect to the God who's calling you in this moment. For everybody else, can we just use this moment to be a moment of just to see what John saw, to look up into the heavens and have that glimpse of transcendence, to recognize the God who's here with us in this moment and just stand in awe of his care and concern for us. Will you stand with me? Will you worship with me?